What's up, guys? Your friendly neighborhood turtle hermit is back, and welcome to round 2 of the Sunday tournament held during week 2 of Smogon Tour 13. I get paired against the longtime player known as Pocket. By long time, I mean that he has been a part of Smogon since 2004, so that dates back to the advanced days. He was also a team member of the Dragon Spiral Tyrants for the Smogon Premier League. Definitely a veteran of the game, so I'll have my work cut out for me. Let's get into it. I'm going to lead with Raikou. He leads with Heatran. Possible that Heatran could be choice spec, so I decided to switch out to Gyarados to scout the set. He switches as well, though, and reveals Flygon, most likely anticipating Thunderbolt from my end. It's too early to take any risks, so I'm going to go back to Raikou, assuming Flygon's Scarf, and was hoping he'd reveal Thunder Punch if he had it, but it's too early to throw out coverage moves, and Pocket doesn't want to tip me off on anything, so he opts for U-turn and goes into Bronzong. Raikou can't 2-hit KO any Bronzong set, so I'm going to go to my own Bronzong to get Stealth Rock up right away, and I figured he would most likely set up Stealth Rock himself on this turn, and he does. A very fast-paced match so far. He decides to switch back to Heatran to force Bronzong out as I set up my own Stealth Rock. Here I decide to go to Gyarados, and he goes for a Fire Blast, and it does a whopping 53%, so it is definitely choice specs. Normally you would assume Overheat as the Fire Stab, so this really got me thinking either he doesn't have it or he's running both. In hindsight, Tyranitar may have been a much better switch-in since Stealth Rock was up already, and I don't have a spinner, and because of that, Gyarados isn't going to be able to come back in unless I use it as fodder for something later on, so I just stay in the Waterfall knowing he specs. Goes back to Bronzong, and I just decide to go for the taunt to prevent any other shenanigans from this Bronzong, but he just finishes Gyarados off with the payback. I bring Tyranitar on the free switch to set up Sand, and the other reason I brought in Tyranitar was to scout the set a bit more. I made this double switch fairly obvious, but I go for it anyway to see if Bronzong has Earthquake or Gyro Ball, and he does show Earthquake as I go back to my own Bronzong. I stay in here just to pay back, just to see what else he would do. He ends up doing this as well. The plan is to get enough damage on Bronzong so I can spring Magneton on it at some point to trap it and KO it with Thunderbolt or Hidden Power Fire depending on the situation. I have a backup mod to deal with Bronzong though, just in case, but I don't want to reveal the backup right now since I'll make it too obvious as to what move it's carrying. I went back to Raikou to speed the process as long as he paybacks. I know he's got Flygon, so Thunderbolt's not a good option, so I show the Aura Sphere instead in case he decides to bring Flygon in. But if I get Bronzong, that's fine as well. He stays in to take it and finishes Raikou off with Earthquake. Now that I am ahead in the damage race, I bring Bronzong back in to throw more paybacks his way to whittle his Bronzong down. If I can get it to around 30%, Magneton can finish it off with Thunderbolt. But after about 2 turns of going back and forth, Pocket decides he's had enough and that his Bronzong would eventually lose anyway, so he goes back to Heatran on my payback. I must have been very cautious about burn hacks because I know the Fire Blast is coming, but I decided to go to Aerodactyl as opposed to Tyranitar since Sand is up. And I must have been trying to eliminate hacks since even Arrow wasn't able to take a Specs Fire Blast, even in the Sand. That or I just underestimated the power of Specs Tran, but it's an easy 2-hit KO. The good news is that I have the speed advantage and I can PP stall him out of Fire Blast by roosting off the damage, barring an untimely crit. Pocket knows this, so he goes back to Bronzong on my roost. Normally Arrow can't even touch Bronzong, but I decide now is the chance to show my custom set. Arrow was the backup check for Bronzong, but I just decided to surprise him now and show that I have the Fire Blast. I get a crit, which wasn't a huge deal. Bronzong would have been left at between 10 and 15%, so Magneton would still finish it off. He brought Flygon in, figured it has to be Scarfs since he's bringing it in directly. So Bronzong was the safest switch, so I go to it. He shows a Thunder Punch. With Bronzong being fairly low, I thought he might stay in for the 3-hit KO, so I decided to show my other custom set by tricking him my Toxic Orb. But he switches to Zapdos, which is just as good for me since I get leftovers out of the situation, and that tells me he's some type of defensive Zapdos. So it being on the timer is not a bad thing. I plan on just foddering Bronzong and bringing in something else to deal with Zapdos. So I just HP Ice to try to get damage on the way out, but Pocket decides to show that Zapdos carries Roar, and he may have been expecting me to switch fearing Heat Wave. The other reason I stayed in is because I was honestly assuming Zapdos was sub-roost. Arrow gets dragged in, which is not good for Pocket. It's too risky to stay in, and I know that he'll switch as well. Predicting the switch, I roost off most of the damage Aerodactyl took, and he goes back to Flygon. I ran a calc on Thunder Punch. Normally it does 80, it maxes at 85%, but he hits it for 89. Because I stayed in the roost again just to see what he would lock into. So his Flygon's adamant. The plan still goes off. I decide to reveal Magneton, who's my only electric resist. He goes for Thunder Punch again. The plan is to lock in the Flash Cannon in case Flygon stays in, but most likely I'll force it out. He knows I'm Scarfed by now though, so he switches his Zapdos to fodder it to see what I would lock into, and he takes advantage and brings Lucario in on the free switch. I have to get Magneton out of there so I can bring it in later to finish Lucario off. If this thing's agility though, it might be game unless I can dance around it and make it burn its Life Orb recoil. I go to Bronzong, he just close combats outright, so I bring back Magneton back in to trap it. Go for Hidden Power Fire since I wanted to try to lure Heatran in. Thunderbolt does more, but then Flygon will come in, who's more dangerous in this situation. So Heatran does come in. I decide to fodder Aerodactyl to give Tyranitar a free switch, since it can take attacks from even Spectran. He locks in the Fire Blast and Aerodactyl goes down. I bring Tyranitar in as planned. I'm going to boost up with Dragon Dance so I can try to pick off the rest of his team, as Tyranitar is my only real hope of winning at this point. He will most likely keep Flygon alive, so Magneton won't be able to punch through as long as it's around. So he stays in the Fire Blast and scout what set I'm running. Here I make a controversial move and decide to go for Earthquake outright. Probably should have danced again to try to seal the deal, since if I had boosted again, I would outrun even Flygon since it was adamant. But I was thinking about possible burn hacks or getting critted, and I didn't want the sweep ruined. Regardless, he reveals his last, which is a Heracross. Thought it was game since every Heracross is Scarfed, but I just went hope for the best, clicked Ice Punch. I outsped, so it wasn't Scarfed. Still had a chance, so he went to Flygon, but the Shuka Berry, he had about a 50% chance to KO me back there, even though he was adamant. So it was basically came down to a coin flip, and he got the damage roll he needed, and that's going to be the match. It was a great game pocket, another nail biter of a match for you guys, and I would expect nothing less from my opponent. On turn 29, I did end up sealing my own fate, since if I had just danced again, it would have been my game. I got focused on the possibility of a crit or a burn though, so it cost me in the end. Burn may not have been that big a deal, since I'd essentially be at +0 for boost had I danced. But if the exact moves at the end there were the same, Heracross would probably live and KO me. Did I make the right move or the wrong move? I'll let you guys decide. But until next episode, Chun is out. Peace.